Lately, there's been a lot of talk about different pockets and communities attempting to transform the kids and all sorts of weird stuff, and the connection to some of these thoughts and philosophies sometimes being used as broad strokes to call people groomers, which isn't always fair, and other times some of these concepts coming from French philosophy and postmodernism that are dark. And today we're going to be reacting to a video from a new YouTube channel I just stumbled across called The Living Philosophy, and it is titled Why Postmodernists Are Pro-Pedophilia. I got my guy Ray Rock with me, and we're going to jump into this video. It's important to know where some of these thoughts and ideas come from, all right? So, real quick.
Hide your kids, hide your wife.
Explicit, explicit, explicit.
Speaking about minors in a radio interview in 1978, Michel Foucault said that assuming that a child is incapable of explaining what happened and was incapable of giving his consent are two abuses that are intolerable, quite unacceptable. The controversy usually concentrates on a petition that was published in France's foremost paper, Le Monde, in 1977, which argued the rights of 12 and 13-year-olds to have relations with whomever they choose. The petition was signed by many prominent names: Michel Foucault, Jacques Derrida, Roland Barthes, Gilles Deleuze, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Simone de Beauvoir, as well as a number of future French ministers. In this
Pretty dark, right? And the issue here is that it's important to know what the downstream and the upstream views are of the ideologies people are aligned with, right? So a lot of the stuff we're seeing from postmodernism, from Marxism, come from these French philosophers. The folks who coined, the gentleman that coined the term cisgendered comes from out of this stream, for example, right? Wow. And so it's good to know the downstream effects of some of these things so that we can connect them and say, okay, I get where this is coming from. I'll give you an example that works against me, just to be fair and balanced, right? The way Fox News used to be. I'll give you an example. So a lot of folks don't know that a lot of our modern conservative right movement, moral majority, that came out of an overflow of Jerry Falwell and them wanting to move on to another culture war issue from segregation in schools to something else. And so they couldn't continue pushing segregation because the country moved on, and so they found other issues, and that's how the modern right got its origin, right? And I'm a conservative, like I don't have no qualms about it.
In the wake of 1968, the era of active politics had begun. Petitions and protests were the engine of this activity. There were hundreds and hundreds of petitions signed and distributed in the coming decade. These petitions attacked the moralistic and ossified establishment on all fronts, one of which was, of course, there was a dramatic shift in sexual mores in the 1960s. 1968 had been preceded by 1967's Summer of Love. There was an atmosphere of freedom and a more general rebellion in lifestyle after 1968, and it was against the backdrop of this sexual revolution that the pro-P lobby enters into the story.
67 is free love.
Yep.
And the right to do whatever you want to do, and hippie free love, and LSD, and all these sorts of things. And then in that, they just start rebelling against all social norms.
Yep.
And you just are rebelling for the sake of rebelling. You don't even know what you're rebelling against.
Yeah, it's the desire for freedom that you don't know that you're actually not desiring freedom. You're desiring lawlessness, because true freedom isn't being free to do whatever you want to do whenever you want to do. Mm-hmm. True freedom is when you're free from something.
Muriel Salmona, a psychiatrist and president of the Traumatic Memory and Victimology Association, has said that after 1968, attitudes towards began to shift among the intellectual elite. Children were viewed as having the right to be considered beings. In Salmona's words, considered sexual orientation. It was all part of a vision of freedom. In the wake of the 1968 protests and the second...
And it's interesting, Ray, that there's a new term for this today called MAPS.
Yep.
Right? And it's not mainstream. And it's not held by everybody who's in the LGTB community. Yep. But it is coming full circle, right? We're telling young kids who are incapable of making choices about tattoos, giving consent, about any of these things, that they're able to make permanent changes to their body by taking hormone replacement therapy at very young ages. The theory goes, well, the next thing they're going to say is if they can give consent to that, then they can give consent to other things.
Sexual revolution of the 60s, the defenders of began to gain a lot of traction. At this time, pro-P activists formed associations such as the Pedophile Liberation Front and the Research Group for a Different Childhood, and they began publishing their own journals, such as Backside and The Little Rogue. As one sociologist, Jean Hughes Deschaux, has commented, opponents of P were accused of being reactionary, and were redefined not as guilty of sexual abuse, but as victims, like homosexuals, of a retrograde legislation. They show
How dark is that? Opponents of pedophilia were accused of being retrograde. So they're lumping this in with homosexuality.
Which is crazy, because this is not two same-sex attracted people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of age,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
This is children. These are babies.
Mm-hmm.
This is somebody's daughter, somebody's son. That's wild.
Yeah.
They show is referencing here the French law at the time, which treated homosexuality as a moral crime punishable by law. The pro-P lobby framed the issue as a matter of oppression of children. The notion of child protection was deemed patriarchal and denounced as a danger to the child's personal integrity. Thus, for the French intellectuals of the era, this was a matter of questioning the state's authority, of questioning whether the state was overreaching by exercising its authority to protect minors from sexual abuse.
It's like, man, authorities have gotten it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So now that means they get everything wrong.
Right. If they got the Vietnam War wrong and they got racism wrong, that means they got everything wrong. So we're going to deconstruct the entire system. What if the very things that Christian culture often dismisses as worldly actually aren't bad desires? What do I mean by that? It's obvious that the world values things like money, fitness, fame, and immediate gratification. But I like to propose that those natural human desires can actually be redirected with God's words and God's ways of doing things in order to bring glory to Him and serve our neighbor on this side of eternity. And I like to call this very concept God-driven ambition. And we'll be unpacking all of this at my very first live podcast in-person gathering happening August 26th in Oceanside, California. We'll have Godlogic Apologetics, Pastor Jeff Moores from Rhythm Church, John Keith, Trizzle Fitness, and hosted by my guy Ray Rock. Lock it in on your calendars right now. Saturday, August 26th in Oceanside, California at Rhythm Church. Click the button down below or go to RuslanLive.com to get more information and get your ticket now.
Journalist Soros Sholandon captured the spirit of the post-1968 era perfectly. Laboratory, the moral order, that is the enemy. And Liberation at that time is nothing but the particular echo of the common vertigo. We are at the end of the 1970s. The traces of the May of the barricades linger on the walls and in our heads. Forbidden to forbid. Let's challenge all forms of authority.
Let's challenge all forms of authority.
Yeah.
Right? Let's challenge all. And what did he say the enemy was? The moral order. The moral order, that is the enemy. It's not systems that people corrupt. That's the issue. Which, by the way, all systems are corrupted. Capitalism, socialism, communism, they're all corrupted by broken people. But it's the moral order that they want to challenge. And they want to forbidden to forbid.
It was more than a period. It was a laboratory. It gave birth to hopes, dreams, senseless fights. The ban, any ban, is felt to belong to the old world, to the world of the bitter, the oppressors, the employers' militias, the bludgeoning police, the corrupt. Thought is in confusion. In this tumult, this reversal of senses, this anchoring of new reference points, in this new understanding of morality and law, this fragility and urgency, everything that stands in the way of all freedoms is to be torn down. Everything was challenged.
That's an L, man. That's a massive L.
Nothing that had been handed down from the old order could be taken for granted. And in instinctively challenging every element of the status quo, it was eventually discovered that perhaps some boundaries were better left in place, like, for example, the belief that children could consent to sex. This is the context in which the petition of 1977 has to be read. These French intellectuals were not allied with the establishment, but were in solidarity against it. They were at the cutting edge of the revolution in social values. In hindsight, this is the best and only case that can be made in the defense of these great thinkers. They were engaged in hundreds of various causes. They were signing new petitions every other day for one cause or another. To isolate the petition from the rest of the zeitgeist of that era is to commit a historical injustice. With that being said, a good rule of thumb for humans in all places everywhere might be, to paraphrase Mark Twain, if you find yourself on the side of it's time to pause and reflect.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes to show, like, you can be so open-minded that your brain falls out.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, you could be so open-minded that your brain falls out. But it's important to note that we're seeing these same ideas creep up today, right? This is in the same stream as the deconstructionist.
Yeah.
Right? We're just going to deconstruct everything, the fabric of everything. This is in the same stream as Marxism, right? And communism. Like, we're going to deconstruct society to the point where why should there be property rights? Why should anybody own anything? Hey, this is a segment from our daily after party stream. Consider partnering with us online for as little as $5 a month to get access to these daily after party streams completely unedited. You'll also get access to our podcast as they are streamed live into the community before anyone else gets to see them, get to interact with our guests, get access to our private Discord server, and a discount code for our store for as little as $5 a month. Ultimately, that will help towards helping us continue contextualizing the gospel using media and podcast here on YouTube. All right, I'll see you over there. Peace.